I want to welcome to the program Dawn Tefft. She is a lead volunteer organizer with the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. She is also a labor organizer herself. And Sam Harshner, who is also a labor organizer and adjunct instructor of political science and history at Marquette University. Dawn, let's start with you. We've had EWOC, the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, has come up a lot on the show over the past, 6 months or so, maybe longer. At time I don't really have a concept of anymore. But tell us what EWOC does.
So EWOC was formed in March 2020 in response to the pandemic. It's a joint project of the Democratic Socialists of America and United Electric, one of the unions that is most dedicated to helping workers organize democratically and to helping workers take action as necessary, which is also something that DSA is very invested in. You know, democracy and action is necessary in order to get movement on the things that workers and voters both care about. And employers weren't protecting workers during the pandemic. So not enough employers were providing masks or PPE or safe distancing policies, remote work policies, or hazard pay for frontline workers. So we were supporting workers in pretty much every major industry around the country and have now helped thousands of workers as a result. And we were helping them identify a short list of, say, key issues and create a campaign to win on those issues. And to do that, we helped them in a variety of ways, from providing them with organizing training to helping them build lists of coworkers to talk to about organizing and to planning escalating actions. And then now we've transitioned to helping workers form unions, which is our primary area of focus, since unions provide workers the ability to negotiate legally binding contracts, which means the employer can't just take back any of their organizing wins over time, which they can do if they don't have a contract, right? And so for this, we help them form organizing committees that are representative of the workplace, like in terms of, gender, race, background, these financial background, these kinds of things. And then educate the committee about how to have effective conversations with their coworkers that really help the group learn about the major issues in the workplace, the things that the most workers care about, the things that are rising to the surface, and that over the time lead to commitments to form a union from a majority of workers. And right now, for instance, one of our major focuses is supporting Chipotle workers in forming unions. So if you or someone you know works at Chipotle, we'd love to hear from you.
All right. Well, I want to come back to that. But I mean, so broadly speaking, and I hate to use this word, but you guys are almost like ad hoc consultants for people who are looking to organize and perhaps unionize.
Correct. Yeah. We advise workers, but we have a very democratic worker-led process where we're really training them and then advising them along the way. And it's to empower them so that they now have this information moving forward and so that they can make informed decisions on their own. And so we're advisors, but it's always up to them what to do with that advice. And we really just try to help them sort of stay on track, move forward, think strategically, things of this nature.
So Sam, you're an adjunct instructor at Marquette, and Marquette instructors and academic workers, I guess, we're looking to organize. So from your perspective, tell us that story, because it's almost like a case study, if you will, of what EWOC can do for folks who want to gain some power in the workplace.
Well, I should expand. I mean, there were legal impediments to us actually forming a union at the time we worked with EWOC. And so our campaign was largely focused on trying to ensure that there were no job cuts in the midst of a kind of a unique world pandemic situation. So ultimately, the work we did with the EWOC allowed us to cut a proposed, 450 cuts down to about 60 people losing their jobs. So I think, they showed their worth right there. EWOC did just what Dawn said. I mean, help helped us build our internal network, which meant how do you start understand how to build lists? How do you have difficult conversations? How do you get over that aversion to having awkward conversations with colleagues? That's maybe the most important thing. How do you use your personal connections to try to build activists out of those kind of friendships and acquaintanceships and kind of relationships with colleagues? And it was, we also taught us to create public-facing organizations like this Marquette Academic Workers Union, like a group called Our Marquette, which was mostly tenure-track faculty, students organizations that allow people to know who you are and know where to put their energy. And so all of those things were really built off of the advice and kind of the structures Dawn provided for us.
How much experience? I mean, you're a labor organizer, and I would imagine folks maybe in the political science department or in I don't know how it breaks down at Marquette, but there are going to be some people who are more attuned to these things and others less so, though they have similar complaints but different experiences. What was the baseline for this? Like how much was, how did that first come together? Were people just walking around like, what do we do here? And and then how did that sort of progress?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ambient discontent, and I think one thing EWOC does is help you bring some coherence to that, and really we cohered around that demand, right? Nobody gets fired, right? But this built, we had a unionization effort that fell short a few years prior, and so the core of the organizers came from that group, and really we were able to reach out to EWOC, who really, again, taught us how to build those networks with close associates. And you're right, some departments are more naturally inclined to do this than others, but build that core and then kind of reach out. And so and that means having conversations with people in the business school, in the economics department, things like that. And what you find is that people's ideological starting point may be different, but their working conditions are similar and they're experiencing the same things in the university. And so if you can get over that hump and actually start to have those one-on-one conversations, you can build a really broad coalition.
What were the legal restrictions on your ability to unionize at that time?
There's a decision associated with Duquesne University that made it difficult for religiously affiliated private institutions from organizing their non-tenure track faculty, basically on religious freedom grounds.
Right, of course. I can only imagine that was yes. I belong to the church of don't like people to organize when I'm negotiating with them.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't want to get anybody in trouble here. Dawn, I read a piece by and I guess was this in Jacobin? Maybe it was with Gabe Winnett. Who we've interviewed on this program, and I think this is in his voice, but he writes, the distinctive equality of EWOC organizing became clear to me in a conversation with a worker who said to me at a crucial inflection point, I'm realizing that I can't persuade anyone of anything. I just need to tell them what I really think and ask them what they really think, and then they'll do what they're going to do, and I can't control that. Oh my God, I just realized that's what you did in this conversation with me. Will you expand on that dynamic, in the way, because I'm not familiar really with another model like the one that EWOC is using right now, particularly in the way that the genesis where you're not going into a situation with an agenda per se, a narrow agenda,
right.
For EWOC. You're trying to achieve almost what they're trying to achieve. And it's almost like a therapist on some level, or, having come from the film business, a good producer comes in and is trying to what the director wants to do. I'm trying to sort of optimize what you're doing there. Can you talk about that dynamic and how
Sure.
unique that is, or are there other entities out there that are sort of doing some of that now?
Well, I mean, I'd say that part of it is intrinsic to union organizing in general, but I'd say we kind of take it to another level where it's as member driven or worker driven as possible. So for instance, in the organizing conversation, the dynamic you were just describing, one would never try and force somebody to take an action or form a union. What you're doing is you're trying to learn about them as people, and you're trying to learn about the issues that they care about, because people are motivated by what they care about. And so once you hear about and learn about them as people, form that relationship of trust and get at what really motivates them, then you find out, they really need healthcare because they've got 3 children, and then you talk to enough people and you realize, look, a lot of people care about this. And so you can really connect people around those shared issues, and you sort of agitate them to feel the injustice of it, and to feel like, oh, we're all worked up about this. We can do something about this collectively, because we're kind of taught to accept the things that we complain about, right? We're taught to accept the status quo, to complain and then move on. But part of organizing is helping people feel the injustice of it, and then use that as the spur to take action. And so from there, it's like the give hope phase, the plan to win, right? We can do something about this. Other workers have won on this before. Here's how they did it. And so it's helping workers find that, right? Know how to talk to people in the ways that really foster other workers' input into the process and their abilities to assist with the organizing, and not just be a voice in it, but be the organizing, because there is no organizing outside of a group of people. Like if you're forming a union, the union isn't a group outside of those workers. It is the workers. And so it's the most successful, the more voice that they have. And we really put that at the forefront. And Sam can attest that I helped them identify major issues, right? And then organize around those and figure out what would work best for their group, given their conditions. So they're the experts in their workplace. I was never the expert in their workplace. I know a lot about academic organizing, but, it was really helping them draw out the things in their workplace that they could focus on, as targets or actions to take, and then helping them refine those and things like that over time.
Sam, was there a particular dynamic that you saw? Like, I guess what I'm thinking of is, and maybe it's different in the context of an academic setting, where, there's a socialization that happens, or at least I perceive one in an academic setting that seems maybe, in some ways, more extensive than in other work situations. But I wonder if there were moments where there was a particular dynamic that kept coming up over and over again. Just as an example, like, it just occurs to me that a realization that the individual issues that a person had with their job turns out not to just be an individual issue, but rather something structural that more than themselves are impacted by. Was that one, or were there others that you came across?
I mean, without question, I think one of the key ones is universities are pretty hierarchical, right? They're almost feudal in the way that they rank people, right? And so there are perceived differences in conditions, and real differences in conditions across that spectrum, from full professor to adjunct, right? To grad worker to staff, those sorts of things. And what you found was, in this moment of crisis, when you started talking to people, even these full professors started to see their fields and their positions as precarious in the given context, and were able to find common cause with people that they normally wouldn't even talk to. And that's true of the same sorts of divisions across departments. And I think that that was not surprising to us, who were starting to organize and had been on the cutting edge of this from the beginning. But it was really, I'm really proud of the really broad coalition we put together to make this happen. And it was because really, at the end of the day, we share these working conditions. That became very obvious.
Dawn, the COVID had that effect on some level of like being the great equalizer, if you will, where, suddenly people realize like, oh, we're all in a similar situation. I mean, when you get to sort of like extreme contexts, these things become clear. I mean, we do this in the just in making an argument, you take it to the extremes to show, to magnify similarities or differences. How, going forward, and certainly we've seen a lot of labor activity over the past 2 years or so. How, going forward, do you maintain the clarity that COVID, that the pandemic provided, without that context, right? Because the further we get away from it, the more people are going to forget that, like, oh, wow, yeah, they're willing to put us out there. And, you know, whether it's, I don't know if I'm working as a waiter or, a delivery or whatever it is, like they didn't, you know, or a factory, like they didn't really care. And like, how do you maintain that level of consciousness going forward?
Yeah. And I'd say that I think workers kind of always had that consciousness. It's just that things became, you know, even more dire in a way that they had to take action in an immediate way. And there was an organization that was there for them to do so that wasn't there previously. And a lot of workers around the country want to organize, you know, they wanted to organize before the pandemic. They still want to organize. They want to form unions. But over the decades, you know, certain politicians have made that incredibly hard. They've done all these things to create all these barriers for organizing unions, including creating a system where you have to hold an election after a card check. Card check is where you sign the cards, right? Then the NLRB schedules an election for down the line. The employer then brings in these corporate union busters to try and intimidate the employees, in essence, to scare them away from voting yes. And, you know, sometimes that's effective. And so there are all these barriers that are in the way. And one of the things that EWOC does is helps to ease those barriers, because there's only so many unions, only so many union organizers in the country, only so many resources up against like all of this corporate money, right? That's coming into play to prevent this from happening. And so by having this broad network of volunteers who are all over the country and willing to help people in all sorts of situations, no matter how, you know, I don't want to say how implausible, but, you know, we'll work with people in a lot of different types of situations that might not seem immediately viable. And so we can really help them create the structures to have something grow and find its legs and potential over time, and then become even more attractive to, say, a potential parent union with which they would affiliate. If they're able to like get this structure in place and do enough assessments of coworkers, et cetera. So we're really helping, I think, to fill a gap there, and that's necessary given all of the resources put into making organizing so difficult for workers, because workers do want it so much.
So, all right, two questions, final questions for you. If I'm working at a place and I like am like this our situation stinks here, and I don't know how to go about even approaching my fellow workers to find out, like, do they share this? I know there's that dude who works the late shift. He's been complaining about stuff, and maybe I'm going to approach him, but I want to use best practices and figure out how to do it. I'm not terribly good with people, whatever it is. How do they contact you? That's question one. And if I'm someone who's like has some experience with organizing and I want to volunteer and be part of EWOC so that I can help the guy I was just talking about in scenario one, how does that work?
So you go to the same link for both and it'll be https //workerorganizing.org and then // I don't know if there's a way to even
workerorganizing.org should probably just take us there. And then, and so what happens? Like, Sam, like, when did you do that? Like, who was the first person that reached out to EWOC? Do you know?
My friend, my friend of mine, Tom Hansberger, was the one who reached out to Dawn, and Tom and I, as well as another friend of mine, Sarah Kizik, had been really core to this organizing effort early on. And he reached out to Dawn, and I mean, I just wanted to follow up on that structure argument. We still have a union fight going today. We're organizing with a national union, pushing for a union for non-tenure track faculty and grad workers at Marquette. It's a real testament to kind of the lasting power of the work that EWOC does. They give you the skills and the structures you need to succeed long term. It takes a while, but you know, I'm optimistic because of the foundation that they laid.
How did that first instance go down? Where you go onto the website and you contact? I mean, was you know, how? If you want, we can mute Dawn, and no, I'm joking. But how did that go down? Because I think like one of the things that really prevents people from reaching out is a sense of like feeling intimidated. I don't know what to do here, and I'm just curious about that first initial contact, because by the time you get to where you are now with like still having this union fight, a lot of those initial sort of concerns and barriers have gone away, and now you're just in the mix of the fight. And but you have the tools, and you have it really is just a question of a sheer sort of like a power battle. But in the beginning, it's not just a question of fighting the power of management or the employers. It's overcoming sort of some internal sort of blockages.
Right. No, and I mean, honestly, it's it's really easy. I mean, you reach out to EWOC, and you get a personalized email in return, right? So somebody follows up with you, and you have a discussion, and so it's really easy. The bar is really low. I think everybody should donate to EWOC so that they have the capacity to do more work. But it's not intimidating at all. And again, I mean, I think their worker-centered approach is really clear, even in that first instance, where they're there to ask what's going on with you, and then kind of what you want to fight for, and they'll offer kind of some ideas for what kind of structures or what kind of assistance they can offer as a result of that. And it's a really good way to get started, because these are some of the most experienced and effective organizers I've come across.
Well, folks you can Google EWOC, EWOC, and Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee will pop up. It is workerorganizing.org. Dawn Tefft and Samuel Harshner, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.